I woke to a harsh white glare burning into my eyes, a brightness so sharp it felt like it was slicing straight into my skull. The ceiling above me hummed with fluorescent lights, cold and unblinking, and the smell of antiseptic hung thick in the air. My throat felt raw. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. Something beeped steadily to my left, a slow, rhythmic reminder that I was still alive. For a few seconds, I could not remember my name where I was, or why every inch of my head throbbed as if someone had struck a bell inside my skull. Then I heard a voice. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" My focus sharpened enough to see a nurse leaning over me, her blue scrubs blurred at the edges. When she noticed my eyes open, she drew in a startled breath. "You are awake! Thank God! Can you tell me your name?" I swallowed hard, but my throat protested. "Hannah," I whispered. The word cracked like dry wood. "Hannah Whitmore." Her shoulders relaxed a little. "You are in the emergency room at Denver General. You were brought in unconscious about 40 minutes ago. You had a significant blow to the head. Do you remember what happened?" I opened my mouth, but before I could answer, a wave of dizziness washed over me, pulling the room sideways. A shadow of something flashed across my memory. A shout. A crash. The sound of something hitting the floor. A deeper voice roaring in my direction. "Not another word from you." The nurse noticed my flinch. "Are you in pain?" I shook my head, even though it hurt to move. The fragments in my mind sharpened, the clatter of a ceramic plate, the tremble in my hands as I stood at the end of a long dinner table, the faint smell of roast turkey mixed with the scent of pine from the centerpiece. I remembered the folded envelope tucked into my pocket. I remembered the way my heart beat so fast I could barely breathe. I had been a step away from telling my family the good news, the news I had held close to my chest for 48 hours because it felt too unreal to speak aloud. I had won $50 million, but I had not told them. I had not told anyone. I had barely told myself. For 30 minutes I had rehearsed the words silently. "I have something important to tell you. I have some wonderful news. You will not believe this." But I had never spoken the full sentence. Instead, I saw my father rise from the table. I saw his face twist into something feral. I heard his chair scrape violently against the floor. I saw his hand coming toward me with sudden force. The present snapped back into focus as another voice entered the room, firmer and more clinical. "I am Dr. Mills. You suffered a moderate concussion and lost consciousness for nearly 4 minutes. We need to know what caused the impact to your head. Did you fall?" My breath caught. Part of me wanted to nod. Part of me wanted to say yes, because saying anything else felt like betrayal, and I had been trained my entire life to avoid that. But the truth pressed against my ribs like something clawing to be let out. I tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper emerged. "I need water." The nurse brought a small cup to my lips. I took a tiny sip and let it settle. When the doctor repeated the question, the room felt colder. "Hannah, how did this happen?" The scene in my mind replayed with brutal clarity. My father's hand connecting with the side of my face, the sharp sting of the impact, the sickening spin of the room as I staggered back, the wooden edge of the kitchen cabinet rushing toward me, the crack when my head hit, then darkness swallowing me whole. I blinked hard. My voice trembled. "Someone hit me." The nurse frowned. "Was it someone at the dinner with you?" I hesitated. My heartbeat grew louder than the beeping monitor. I felt 8 years old again. 10. 15. Every age where fear had wrapped tight around my lungs. The memory of the voice that ruled my childhood echoed inside me. "Do not embarrass me. Do not talk back. Do not make a scene." The doctor stepped closer. "Hannah, we cannot help you unless you tell us what happened." My lips tingled numb and stiff, but the words forced their way out. "It was my father." The room fell silent. The nurse froze in place, her eyes widening, her expression shifting from confusion to shock. "Your father. He brought you in. He said you slipped in the kitchen." My chest tightened. I closed my eyes. I could still hear his voice strained but controlled as I drifted in and out during the ambulance ride. "She is clumsy. She trips all the time. She will be fine." The nurse exchanged a glance with the doctor. The unspoken meaning passed between them instantly. "Domestic assault? Required reporting. High risk." The doctor cleared his throat. "Hannah, we will need to notify law enforcement. This is mandatory." "Are you in danger if you go home?" I felt tears sting the corners of my eyes. For the first time since childhood, I answered honestly, "Yes." The nurse placed a gentle hand on my wrist. "You are safe here. He cannot come back." I inhaled shakily as the beeping monitor counted each rapid beat of my heart. The realization settled heavily in my chest. I had survived the blow. I had survived the fall. But I had not survived the lie. Not until now. I lifted my gaze. My voice broke, but the truth finally left my mouth without hesitation. My father did this. The nurse stepped back as if the weight of the confession pushed her away. Her face softened with horror and sympathy. "Your father did this to you." I nodded once. The lights above me flickered faintly. My vision blurred again. Before everything faded to a gray haze, I heard the nurse's voice echo toward the doorway, urgent and firm, calling for security and preparing for the report that would change everything. Then the world slipped away for the second time that night. My name is Hannah Whitmore, and I am 34 years old, but for most of my life, I have felt smaller than that number suggests, as if the years never quite settled onto me the way they should have. I work as a data analyst for a mid-size firm in downtown Denver, the kind of job where everything is quiet and logical and predictable. Maybe that is why I chose it. Numbers do not yell. Spreadsheets do not slam doors. Algorithms do not ask you why you were even born. My father does. His name is Richard Whitmore, and if you asked anyone outside our home to describe him, they would give you an entirely different man from the one I knew. They would tell you he is disciplined, a strong leader, a man who served in the military for 20 years and carried himself with the stance of someone who believes in order and respect. They would say he is a survivor, a provider, a man who never raises his voice unless necessary. They would be wrong. The man they describe is the man he pretends to be. The real version is the one I grew up with, the one whose voice echoed through every corner of our house like a command siren. I learned early that love and fear are not opposites when you grow up in a home like mine. They blend together until you cannot tell which one you are reacting to. My father was a man who seemed to believe children existed to reflect his successes and absorb his failures. If he had a bad day, everyone had a bad day. If he lost his temper, it was because someone provoked him. If he felt powerless, he restored his power by taking it from the people closest to him. That person was almost always me. I was 6 when I first understood that something was wrong with the way he treated me. He snapped at my mother for the way she cut vegetables and knocked a bowl out of her hand. When I picked up the pieces, he yelled at me for being in the way. I apologized even though I did not know what I had done. He stared down at me and said, "Stop talking if you do not know what you are talking about." From that day forward, I learned silence before I learned confidence. My mother died when I was 11, and the house became even quieter. He remarried 2 years later, and my stepmother Linda arrived with gentle eyes and a voice that trembled whenever my father entered a room. I used to think she did not like me. Later, I understood she was just as afraid as I was, but my father did not fear silence the way the rest of us did. He filled it. He filled it with rules, expectations, criticism, and the constant reminder that respect was something he deserved simply because he demanded it. My older brother Brad thrived under him. Brad was everything my father wanted in a son. He was loud, he was forceful, he was athletic. He understood how to mimic masculinity in the way that made my father proud. I was not like that. I was quieter, softer, more uncertain. When I cried, my father said I was dramatic. When I spoke, he said I talked too much. When I succeeded, he accused me of bragging. When I failed, he said that was exactly what he expected. No matter what I did, it was wrong. I once asked him why he hated me. I could not have been more than 14. He told me he did not hate me, he hated the way I made him feel. I never asked again. As an adult, I tried to put distance between us. I moved out at 18 and found a small apartment with peeling paint and a bathroom sink that never stopped dripping. It was tiny, but it was mine. The first night I slept there, I thought I would feel free. Instead, I cried because the silence was unfamiliar. I kept waiting for footsteps in the hallway, for the sound of his hand hitting a wall because someone left a glass too close to the edge of a counter. Even after I left the house, he found ways to remind me that freedom was conditional. He criticized every job I took. He questioned every friend I made. He called me ungrateful for moving away. He told me I embarrassed him when I chose college instead of joining the military. He said I owed him for everything he had done. And part of me believed him. That is the part I hate the most. When I say he hated me, I do not mean in the way strangers hate each other. I mean in the way someone hates a mirror that shows them something they refuse to confront. I think he hated seeing vulnerability. I think he hated seeing independence in a woman he thought he could control. I think he hated that I kept trying to stand up even after he pushed me down. And the more I tried to build a life outside his orbit, the more he pulled me back with guilt or anger, or the threat of cutting me off entirely. He hated when I succeeded because he could not take credit for it. He hated when I failed because he could use it against me. He hated when I spoke because it meant I had a voice. He hated most when I smiled because it meant I had hope. That night at the family dinner was not the first time he snapped. It was the first time he drew blood. The first time he knocked me unconscious. The first time he crossed a line. Even he could not hide behind excuses. But the hatred behind it was familiar. It had been building for decades. People ask why victims stay in these situations, why we keep going back, why we keep hoping. I do not know how to explain that sometimes you go back because you want to believe the person who broke you can someday choose not to. You go back because the version of them you wish existed is easier to love than the version that does. You go back because walking away forever feels like ripping out a piece of your own history. You go back because you hope things will be different this time. This time you think you will not say the wrong thing. This time you think he will not get angry. This time you think you will be enough. That night, I walked into his house believing maybe the good news I carried in my coat pocket would soften him. Maybe he would smile. Maybe he would be proud of me for once. Instead, he did what he always did. He reminded me who he expected me to be. Someone silent. Someone small. Someone who never dared to speak without permission. Someone who would never be allowed to stand in her own light. And when I tried to speak anyway, he made sure I would not finish the sentence. I never expected my life to change inside a gas station on the corner of Colfax Avenue, the kind of place where the fluorescent lights flicker overhead and the floor tiles always feel slightly sticky no matter how often they mop. It was a Wednesday night cold enough that my breath fogged in front of me every time I exhaled. I had stopped to put $20 of gas in my car and pick up a bottle of water before heading home from work. The clerk behind the counter was a teenager who barely looked at anyone, his eyes glued to his phone. I still do not know what made me buy a lottery ticket that night. I had never been a lottery person. My father said only stupid people wasted money on false hope. Maybe that was exactly why I bought it. Maybe I wanted to feel a flicker of something he could not control. The ticket cost $2. I remember thinking that even if I lost $2 was worth the tiny spark of possibility I felt as I slipped it into my jacket pocket. I drove home, tossed the ticket on my kitchen counter, and forgot about it. The next morning, I overslept spilled coffee on my blouse and missed the bus I usually took. I was cursing under my breath when I reached for my keys and accidentally knocked the lottery ticket to the floor. I picked it up, smoothing the creases, and on a whim, checked my phone to see the winning numbers. I read the screen once, then twice, then a third time. I blinked hard like my vision was playing tricks on me. The first number matched, then the second, then the third. My hands started to shake. My heartbeat pounded in my chest so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I whispered the numbers aloud, matching each one to the ticket, my voice trembling more with every match. 4 numbers. 5, 6. I stood frozen in my tiny kitchen, staring down at the flimsy slip of paper that had just rewritten the laws of my universe. My throat tightened until I could not breathe. I gripped the edge of the counter because my knees were threatening to give out. I kept waiting for the numbers to rearrange themselves, for my eyes to refocus and reveal I had misread everything. But the truth sat in my palm, undeniable and terrifying and unreal. I had won $50 million, not 50,000, not 50 cents. 50 million. I laughed, but it came out like a choke. Then I cried a little. Then I laughed again. My emotions ricocheted around my chest like a bullet in a steel room. Happiness, shock, disbelief, fear, all of it tangled together. I walked around my apartment in circles, clutching the ticket like it might evaporate if I loosened my fingers. I checked the numbers again, then again. I pulled up the lottery website on my laptop to verify the draw. Same numbers, same jackpot, same mind-numbing reality. For a moment, the world went quiet. A warm, overwhelming stillness washed over me. I could leave my father's house behind forever. I could move somewhere he could not reach me. I could pay off my student loans. I could buy a home that did not smell like old carpeting and cheap paint. I could take Linda away if she wanted to leave him. I could build a life where fear was not the foundation. My father's voice broke through the fantasy like a fist slamming onto a table. You will always be nothing without me. I closed my eyes and remembered all the times I believed him. The nights he yelled because dinner was late. The mornings he mocked me for crying. The years he told me my voice was too soft, my dreams too unrealistic, my effort too weak. I remembered the way he looked at me when I graduated college as if I had personally offended him by succeeding at something he could not control. I had survived everything he did, but I had never stopped feeling the weight of him pressing against my ribcage even from miles away. And now, here I was, standing with $50 million in my hand, and the terrifying knowledge that my life could now be mine. Completely and irrevocably mine. That thought alone made my hands tremble again. The fear did not come from the money itself. The fear came from knowing what my father would do if he found out. He would accuse me of lying. He would demand control. He would say I owed him. He would try to take ownership of my success the way he tried to take ownership of everything else. I knew exactly how he would react because he was predictable in all the ways abusers are predictable. He would feel threatened. He would feel undermined. He would feel challenged, and he would strike. Maybe not with his hands, maybe with words, or with guilt, or with anger, but he would strike. Still, I felt something pushing inside my chest, something I had not felt in a long time. Pride. Not the kind of pride you show the world, but the kind that grows in the quiet corners of yourself when you realize you have changed. I wanted to tell someone, anyone, but I did not trust a single person in my life with that information yet. Not coworkers, not neighbors, and definitely not my father. I put the ticket in a small envelope, sealed it, and tucked it into a hardcover book. I even taped the book closed because the fear of losing the ticket set my nerves on fire. For 2 days, I carried the envelope with me everywhere like a secret heartbeat. On Friday, the lottery office confirmed the win after I brought the ticket in. They congratulated me. They shook my hand. They gave me paperwork and tax information and instructions I could barely focus on. The clerk smiled and said, "This is going to change your life." I nodded even though my stomach twisted. I was terrified of change, terrified of freedom, terrified of the man who always told me I would never have either. But when I left the office, I made a decision. I would tell my family, not because I wanted their approval, not because I believed my father would suddenly love me. I wanted to tell them because for once in my life I had good news that was mine alone, and I wanted to say it out loud without fear. I convinced myself the money would not matter. I convinced myself we could sit at a table and he would smile. I convinced myself maybe he would be proud. Hope is a dangerous thing for people who grew up like me. It makes you walk into rooms you should run away from. It makes you believe people can change when all the evidence says otherwise. It makes you think a good moment can undo years of bad ones. So I went to that dinner with the envelope tucked into my coat pocket and a fragile, trembling hope in my chest. I never imagined that instead of celebrating my good news, I would end up on the kitchen floor with my father's handprint burning across my face and my head bleeding onto the tile. I never imagined the truth would send me to the emergency room instead of sending me into a better life. The wind cut across my cheeks as I stepped out of my car and stared at the house I had grown up in, the house that had held more silence and fear than warmth. It sat hunched on its lot like an aging animal guarding territory it no longer understood. The paint on the siding had peeled in long, curling strips since the last time I visited, revealing the raw wood underneath. A single porch light flickered, struggling to stay lit in the early evening gloom. I stood there for a moment, keys still in my hand, feeling my stomach twist with the same nervous tension that used to knot itself inside me every afternoon when I walked home from school, hoping my father would be in a good mood. I should have turned around. I should have trusted the heaviness settling in my chest, but hope is stubborn, especially when it has not been fed in years. I told myself it would be different tonight. I told myself I was bringing good news, and that good news could soften even the hardest people. The envelope with the lottery confirmation pressed against my ribs inside my coat. I tried to draw strength from it, but instead it made me feel more exposed, as if I was carrying a secret that might burst out of me if I moved too quickly. I took a breath, forced my shoulders back, and climbed the porch steps. The wood creaked under my boots. I knocked. It was not even a full second before the door pulled open and my father stood there filling the frame. Richard Whitmore had always been an imposing figure, but age had chiseled him into something sharper, more rigid. His shoulders were still broad, his jaw still tight, and his eyes still carried that same cold evaluation he used on recruits in his military years. His gaze swept over me quickly, not with affection, but with assessment. "You are late," he said. "No, hello, no, how are you? No, I am glad you came." Just the reminder that in his world punctuality mattered more than people. I stepped inside. The air hit me immediately. It smelled like stale coffee, old carpet, and lemon cleaner. The house was warm in temperature, but cold in atmosphere, just like always. The walls were lined with framed photos of my father's military achievements and Brad's trophies, years of accomplishments displayed like medals of honor. There was not a single picture of me. My father closed the door behind me with a heavy thud. I followed him into the dining room where the table was already set. The overhead light cast a harsh glow across the room and made the shadows stretch long along the walls. Brad sat at the far end of the table, leaning back in his chair, with the smug posture of someone who believes the world exists to entertain him. He lifted his eyes as I walked in and smirked. "Look who finally decided to show up." I ignored him. Linda, my stepmother, stood near the kitchen island arranging a plate of rolls. When she looked up, her eyes flicked to mine for a brief second, full of something I could not quite name. Fear, maybe. Exhaustion. She quickly looked away, her shoulders tightening. "Hello, Linda," I said gently. She managed a small nod. "Your father has been waiting," she whispered, as if saying it louder might trigger a landmine. My father took his seat at the head of the table, the place he had claimed since I was a child. I sat down across from Brad and immediately felt the weight of his scrutiny. There was a glint of curiosity in his eyes that made me uneasy, as if he sensed something had changed in me and he was itching to poke at it. The tension in the room felt thick enough to cut. My father looked at me with a familiar, disapproving frown. "So what is this important announcement you insisted on making?" Brad chuckled under his breath. "Let me guess. Another failed relationship, or maybe she finally got a promotion after 10 years of playing with spreadsheets." His laugh was sharp, a cruel little sound meant to provoke. I tried to keep my breathing steady. This was how they always were, my father attacking from the front, Brad flanking from the side, and Linda shrinking into herself at the back of the room. I forced a small smile. "It is good news," I said. "Nothing bad." My father scoffed. "Good news from you. We will see." There it was again, the immediate dismissal, the instinct to crush before I could even speak. I reached for the water glass in front of me, but my hand trembled slightly. I hoped no one noticed. My father certainly did. His brows tightened. "You look nervous." "Why?" I shook my head. "I am fine." His voice dropped lower. "You are hiding something. You always are." The words hit me harder than they should have because a part of me knew he was right. I was hiding the envelope, hiding the truth that would change everything. I swallowed. "I am not hiding anything." "Yes, you are," Brad said. He leaned forward with a grin. "You look like someone who is about to confess to something embarrassing. Maybe she quit her job again." My father jabbed a finger against the table. "Tell us now. Do not drag this out." There was a time when those words would have made me freeze. A time when I would have apologized even though I had done nothing wrong. A time when I would have shrunk into myself to avoid the blow that might follow. But tonight, I felt something new. Maybe it was courage. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the knowledge that for the first time in my life, I had something to hold on to that belonged entirely to me. Still, the tension in the air felt like static crawling across my skin. I could sense something was wrong. The way my father stared at me, the way Brad leaned forward, the way Linda quietly set down the basket of rolls and stepped back as if she wanted as much distance as possible between herself and whatever was about to happen. Something in my chest tightened. The house felt smaller than it used to. The air felt heavier. Every instinct whispered that I should leave, that I should turn around and walk out before opening my mouth. But hope is stubborn. Hope is blind. Hope tells you that one good moment might be enough to soften decades of cruelty. So I inhaled, sat up straighter, and slid my hand slowly into my coat pocket where the envelope rested against my palm like a fragile heartbeat. Everything in the room grew quiet. Even Brad stopped smirking long enough to watch me. My father's eyes narrowed. "This better not be one of your dramatic stunts," he warned. A shiver ran through me, but I pushed past it. I had come here believing that for once in my life I could say something joyful without fear. I had come here thinking my father might smile. I had come here imagining a version of him that had never truly existed. I should have known the night was already lost. The moment I placed both hands on the edge of the table, the atmosphere shifted as if the air itself recognized what my family never had. My father's eyes sharpened. Brad straightened in his chair, and Linda froze near the kitchen doorway, holding a dish she had forgotten to set down. I could feel their attention closing in around me, heavy and suffocating. The table was covered with the usual attempt at a pleasant family dinner. Roast turkey sliced, 2 thick potatoes mashed until gluey green beans that looked boiled within an inch of their lives. But the food did not matter. It never did. The real meal was always the tension, the criticism, the sharp remarks waiting to be served before anyone took their first bite. My father cleared his throat, the sound loud and authoritative. "Are you going to speak, or are you going to sit there shaking like a leaf?" I forced my fingers to stop trembling, though the effort felt like trying to steady a collapsing bridge. I opened my mouth, but Brad cut in with a mocking laugh. Maybe she forgot what she came to say. That would be classic Hannah. I ignored him, but the familiar sting of humiliation scraped against my skin. It was the same script as always. Brad attacks. Dad approves. Linda disappears inside herself. I reminded myself to stay calm, to stay steady, to survive this room long enough to say what I needed to say. My father watched me the way a drill sergeant watches a raw recruit, his jaw clenched and unclenched with impatience. "Do not waste my time." I tried again. "I wanted us all to be together tonight because I have something important I want to tell you." Important how my father interrupted. "Is this about money? Did you lose your job again?" His voice was sharp enough to slice through bone. I blinked. "No, I did not lose my job." Brad smirked. "That is surprising. I expected you to come in here crying about some new crisis." His words landed with the same familiar ache I had felt for years. But tonight, the ache pressed against something stronger inside me. A small, steady flame of resolve. I pressed my lips together and said quietly, "It is not a crisis. This is actually something good." My father scoffed. "From you." His disbelief stung more than I wanted to admit. I felt my chest tighten. "I do have good news sometimes." "Name one," Brad said. "Just one time you brought something positive into this house." I looked down at the tablecloth at the worn stitching along the edge. I wanted to look anywhere except into the eyes that had never seen me as anything but a disappointment. My father leaned forward. "You have embarrassed this family more times than I can count. I raised you better than that." "Dad," I began, but he sliced the air with his hand. "Do not start with excuses. You are 34 years old and still behave like a confused teenager. You never commit to anything. You quit when things get hard. You always take the easy way out." The words slammed into me with familiar force. Years of conditioning wrapped around my throat. Tell him he is right. apologize, shrink, stay small. I dug my nails into my palms and reminded myself that I was not a child anymore. I steadied my breathing and lifted my head. I am not here to talk about the past. I am here to share something important, something meaningful, something that matters to me. Brad laughed again. Oh no, here we go. She is about to announce she joined a yoga class. Or maybe she finally learned how to cook something other than frozen meals. I tried to brush off his words, but my father's expression told me he only half tolerated the teasing because it gave him time to build his own criticism. He folded his arms. Let me guess. You want us to congratulate you for something trivial, or you are looking for attention. You always want attention? I shook my head. It is not about attention. He raised an eyebrow. Then what is it? I paused. This was it. The moment I had imagined for 2 days. The moment I had rehearsed in my mind, picturing their faces changing from irritation to surprise to pride. But now, sitting at the table with their derision pressing down on me, that fantasy felt foolish. Brad stared at me with open amusement. You are dragging this out because you think we care. We do not. Just spit it out. Linda shifted, finally speaking. Maybe we should just let her finish. My father glared at her. Stay out of it. She lowered her gaze immediately. I felt the urge to reach across the table and take her hand, not to comfort myself, but to comfort her. But I kept my hand still. My father turned back to me. Say it. Now. I swallowed hard. Before I could form a single word, he muttered something under his breath. Probably wants money. They always do. Something in me cracked. I had spent my entire life being told I was less, being told I would never be enough, being told my voice did not matter, and now, on the night I finally had something extraordinary to share, they could not even let me finish a sentence. Brad snorted. Seriously, what is the announcement? Did you finally find someone desperate enough to date you? I stared at him. Then I stared at my father, who did not even bother to correct him. The room felt smaller, the tension thicker, the air harder to breathe. I tried again. Dad, I have good news. He slammed his fist on the table. The sound cracked like a gunshot. Enough. My breath caught. The glasses rattled. The turkey platter shifted. Linda flinched so hard she dropped her napkin. You do not get to make dramatic declarations in my house. His voice was low, dangerous, vibrating with something barely contained. You speak when spoken to. You do not stand up like you are leading the room. This is not your stage. My chest tightened, my throat burned, but I held my ground. I am just trying to tell you something good, something I am proud of, something significant. Brad rolled his eyes. If it was actually significant, someone other than you would have said it by now. My father jabbed a finger at me. Sit down. You are acting ridiculous. My pulse pounded in my ears. I am already sitting. Do not talk back to me. His words struck like electric shocks. Every instinct told me to back down, but something inside me whispered one desperate truth. If I did not speak now, I might never speak again. I slowly reached into my coat pocket and touched the envelope. My father noticed. His eyes narrowed into slits. What is that? My heart hammered. Just something I wanted to share. His face darkened. Are you hiding something? His voice rose with growing fury. You always hide something. You are always keeping secrets. I froze, not because he was wrong, but because he was right. I was hiding something, something bigger than he could fathom, and that terrified him. I could see it in his eyes. That fear was the match. His anger was the gasoline, and I was sitting in the middle of the fire. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips as I curled them around the edge of the envelope inside my coat. The paper felt warm from being pressed against my body for the past hour, but my hands felt cold, the kind of cold that comes from fear rather than temperature. My father stared at the slight movement beneath my jacket like a predator watching something shift in the grass. What is that? His voice carried a dangerous edge, low but sharp. The kind of tone that always meant trouble was seconds away. I swallowed. My throat felt tight, almost too tight to speak, but I forced out the words anyway. It is something important, something I wanted to share. Brad leaned forward with an exaggerated sigh. Oh my God. Just spit it out. You are acting like you are proposing to someone. Linda stood still in the doorway, hands clasped tightly in front of her eyes, darting between us like she was bracing for impact. My father did not blink. He kept his eyes on the envelope, suspicion deepening in every line of his face. I said, "Tell us," he demanded. "Do not make this another one of your dramatic moments." I drew in a breath. This is not dramatic, I promise. I just have something good to say. Good, my father scoffed. You have never brought anything good into this house. His words cut through me more sharply than I expected. I tried to ignore the sting, but the truth was that it hurt every time, no matter how much I prepared myself. I kept my hand inside my coat and slowly pulled the envelope out. My father's eyes followed it like it was a weapon instead of a simple piece of paper. Sit down, he ordered. I am sitting, I answered softly. Do not talk back to me. Brad laughed under his breath. Here we go. The Hannah attitude, the victim act. My fingers tightened around the envelope. I felt the weight of the moment pushing on my chest. I needed to get the words out before courage slipped away. I opened my mouth. I wanted to tell you that. My father slammed his palm flat on the table again, not as hard as before, but loud enough to make my heart jump. That sound more than anything had conditioned my body to freeze. The muscles in my shoulders locked, my breath hitched. He pointed at the envelope. What is in there? His voice grew tighter as if the sight of it offended him. I felt my stomach drop. He did not know what it was, but he knew it meant something to me, and that alone was enough to provoke him. It is just something personal, I said. His eyes flashed. Personal. You think you get to have secrets in my house? Brad snorted. She probably wants to show us a certificate from some online course. Or a diet plan. Or maybe a bill she wants us to pay for her. I ignored him. For once, I did not look at him or at Linda. I kept my eyes on my father because I needed him to hear me, even if he did not listen. Even if he never had. Dad, this is something I am proud of. Something I worked for. Something that means a lot to me, and I cannot believe this, he snapped. Your tone, your posture. You are acting like you have something over us, like you are about to tell us you are better than this family. My voice cracked. That is not what I said. That is what you meant. It is not. Then what is it? Tell me exactly what could be so important that you drag us here and sit there smirking with your little envelope. I am not smirking. He slammed the table again. Do not contradict me. My heart raced, pounding against my ribs. My fingers trembled so hard the envelope rustled. I just want to share something good. Something I am grateful for. Something that could change. Brad cut in, waving his hand dismissively. This is ridiculous. You are dragging this out because you want the attention. You always do. I clenched my jaw. I never ask for attention. You always ask for attention, my father snapped. Your entire life has been one long cry for help, one dramatic performance after another. I shook my head. That is not true. Yes, it is, Brad laughed. She is doing it right now. I closed my eyes for a moment. I needed 1 second to gather the pieces of myself that had cracked under the pressure of this room for decades. When I opened them again, my father was still glaring, still waiting, still demanding control he did not deserve. Just tell us, he growled. Tell us or put it away. My chest tightened. If I put it away, I would never open it again. If I spoke, I risked everything. The room felt like it was holding its breath with me. I lifted the envelope. My voice was barely above a whisper. I wanted to share some good news with you. Some really good news. My father's expression twisted into something darker, more volatile. Moving out. That is what this is it not? He jabbed a finger at me. You are planning to walk away from this family. That is what this whole stupid act is about. No, I said firmly. I am not leaving. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing. You think you can stand there and declare things without my permission. Who do you think you are? My breath hitched. I am your daughter. Then act like one and speak when spoken to. I felt the panic rise inside me, the urge to shrink, the instinct to submit, the fear I had carried since childhood pressing against my throat. But beneath it all was something else, something small but fierce, something that whispered, "This is your moment. If you do not speak now, you never will." I inhaled, lifted the envelope with trembling fingers, and tried one last time. "Dad, please, just listen. I have something wonderful to tell you." I never finished that sentence. The second the words left my mouth, or rather the beginning of them, something in my father's face changed. It was not gradual. It was not subtle. It was as if a switch inside him snapped into a position I had spent my entire life trying to avoid. His jaw tightened, his shoulders squared, his eyes locked onto the envelope in my hand with a burning suspicion that made my stomach drop. For one suspended moment, the room went completely silent. No one breathed. No one moved. Even the overhead light seemed to freeze. Then my father stood, not slowly, not cautiously, not... He shot up from his chair with such force that it scraped across the floor and slammed into the wall behind him. Linda flinched as if the noise had split her in half. Brad stopped smirking. He looked shocked for a fraction of a second before masking it with a sneer. My father pointed at me, his hand shaking with barely contained fury. "You do not make announcements in my house." His voice was low, guttural, the kind of voice that made every hair on my arms stand on end. I felt myself shrink back instinctively. "Dad," I began, but the syllable barely formed before he slammed his palm onto the table so hard the plates jumped. The sound cracked through the room like thunder. "I said you do not make announcements here." My throat tightened. I was 34 years old, but in that moment I felt 6 again. I felt every instinct screaming at me to apologize, to shrink, to retreat. But I held on to the envelope not because of the money inside it, but because it was the only thing tethering me to the courage I had tried so desperately to summon. "Dad, please just listen." I tried again. He did not listen. He lunged. That was the only word for it. He lunged across the space between us with a sudden violent movement that sent the chair beside him toppling. The sound of wood hitting the floor echoed in my bones. I scrambled backward in my seat, but there was nowhere to go. His hand shot out and grabbed the front edge of the table, yanking it toward him in a single furious motion, rattling the dishes and sending a fork clattering onto the floor. Brad muttered something, maybe a warning, maybe a curse, but I could not hear it over the pounding in my ears. My father's eyes were wild. "You think you get to come into my home and act like you are above us? You think you get to stand up and wave your little secrets around like you are something important." His voice grew louder, sharper, and every word felt like a blow. "That envelope is nothing. You are nothing." The envelope trembled in my hand. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to say something, anything, but my knees locked beneath the table. I could not move. My father stepped closer, closing the distance between us with heavy footsteps that vibrated through the floor. "Say what is in that envelope. Now." His face twisted into something feral, something I had seen before, but never this clearly. I opened my mouth. I wanted to speak calmly. I wanted to soothe the moment, but the truth caught in my throat. "It is just good news," I whispered. "Something that happened this week, and I stopped talking because his expression darkened to a terrifying degree. His fists clenched, his shoulders tensed, his breathing quickened. "No," he growled. "You are lying. That same lie in your voice, that same tone you use when you think you can slip away. You are hiding something." His rage grew sharper, more focused. "You are planning to leave. You are planning to walk out on this family, and you think you can just stand up and say something without asking me first." I shook my head hard. "No, Dad, no, that is not what I meant at all. Please, just let me, Dad." For the third time, he slammed his hand on the table harder than ever before. Do not talk back to me. The force of it made the water glass tip over and spill across the tablecloth. The cold liquid spread toward me like a warning. Linda gasped softly, her hands flying to her mouth. Brad stared at my father with wide eyes, now a flicker of fear where the smugness had been. Then everything happened in a blur. My father's arm swung. His hand, large and fast, came toward me with a velocity that made the room shrink around me. I barely had time to inhale before the impact hit. It was sudden and jarring, a blunt force that struck the side of my face with a crack that seemed to echo inside my skull. My vision blurred instantly. The room tilted. I did not even feel myself fall backward, only the sickening weightlessness that came a split second before impact. The back of my head struck the sharp wooden edge of the kitchen cabinet. Not hard enough to make a sound, but hard enough to make my mind go white. I heard something else hit the floor. The envelope. I heard Brad shout something incoherent. I heard Linda whisper, "Oh God." I heard my father's breath ragged and harsh, like he was still searching for someone to fight. But the sounds were drifting away from me, as if carried down a long tunnel. My vision pulsed. The room dimmed at the edges. I felt warm liquid trickling behind my ear, but I could not lift my hand to touch it. My limbs went numb. My heartbeat pounded against my skull, each throb louder than the last. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. The last thing I saw was my father's silhouette standing over me, his chest rising and falling with adrenaline, his expression unreadable. The last thing I heard before everything went dark was his voice low and furious, saying exactly what he had conditioned me to believe my entire life. "You should have stayed quiet." Then the world went black. When consciousness returned, it did not come gently. It came in heavy waves, each one slamming into me with the dull pressure of a rising tide. My eyelids felt glued shut. My mouth felt dry enough to crack. My head throbbed with a deep, pounding ache that made it hard to tell where the pain ended and where I began. The first sound I registered was the steady beeping of a monitor, rhythmic and unforgiving. Then came the cold sting of air against my skin and the faint hum of fluorescent lights above me. I forced my eyes open. The ceiling blurred, then sharpened into a grid of white panels. A hospital ceiling. Recognition washed over me in fragments. ER, lights, pain. My father's voice, the crack of impact, the kitchen cabinet, the floor rushing up. I tried to move, but my body resisted. A pulse of pain radiated from the back of my skull down into my jaw. I let out a low groan. Immediately, a voice appeared beside me. "She is awake." The nurse leaned over me, her eyes widening slightly with relief. She wore light blue scrubs and had a badge clipped to her pocket that read, "Grace" in black lettering. She adjusted the blanket covering me and spoke in a calm but firm tone. "Do not move too quickly. You took a hard hit to the head." My breath trembled on its way out. "What happened?" The words came out slurred. She hesitated just long enough for me to sense the answer would not be simple. "You were brought in by a man who identified himself as your father. You were unconscious when the paramedics reached the house." "My father?" The word tasted metallic in my mouth. She nodded. "He told us you slipped in the kitchen and hit your head." Something inside me twisted a mixture of disbelief and a strange, hollow familiarity. Of course he said that. Of course he crafted a lie before I even hit the ground. Of course he would rather rewrite reality than admit what he had done. The nurse continued, her voice careful. But the pattern of injury did not match a simple fall. I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" She glanced toward the hallway where a curtain was half drawn. Then she lowered her voice. "You have bruising along your cheek and jawline that suggests blunt force, and the angle of the skull impact is inconsistent with slipping forward or backward. You were struck." She said the word gently, but there was no room for misunderstanding. The world around me wavered. Not because I was surprised, but because hearing someone else say it made it real in a way my mind had avoided. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened. The nurse placed a hand on the rail of my bed. "You are safe here. No one can hurt you in this room." That reassurance broke something inside me. My eyes burned as tears welled up, not from the pain, but from the simple truth that safety was a foreign concept to me. Footsteps approached. A man in a white coat stepped into view holding a chart. He looked to be in his mid-40s with sharp eyes softened by concern. "I am Dr. Emerson. How are you feeling?" I swallowed hard. "My head hurts." "That is expected. You have a moderate concussion. You lost consciousness for approximately 4 minutes." 4 minutes! The number echoed in my chest like a cold metallic knock. "That is a long time," he continued. "We ran a CT scan as a precaution. There is no internal bleeding, but there is swelling. We will need to monitor you closely for the next several hours." I nodded, even though the motion made me dizzy. The doctor exchanged a glance with the nurse before turning his attention back to me. "Hannah, can you tell us what happened?" The room seemed to tighten around me. I stared at the blanket, tracing the wrinkles with my eyes. I could still hear the echo of my father's voice. "You should have stayed quiet." The doctor repeated the question gently but firmly. "Did you slip? Did someone push you?" My breath came shallow. Something inside me recoiled. Old instincts rising like a reflex. Do not talk. Do not embarrass him. Do not make a scene. Do not speak unless spoken to, and certainly do not speak the truth. The nurse must have recognized the signs. She pulled a chair closer and sat beside me, lowering herself to my level. "Hannah," she said softly, "the injuries you have do not happen by accident. We see this type of trauma often. You are not the first. You will not be the last. You will be believed." Her words cracked open a door inside me I had kept barred for decades. My voice came out thin and shaky. "He hit me." The nurse nodded slowly as if she had expected it all along. The doctor's jaw tightened. "Your father." I could not bring myself to say the word again. I nodded. A wave of shame washed through me, even though I had done nothing wrong. The doctor exhaled a controlled breath, then straightened. "Hannah, I need you to know that in cases like this, we are legally required to alert the authorities. You are the victim of a violent assault. Police officers will be here shortly to take your statement." My stomach dropped. The police! My mind flashed to my father's face, his rage, his certainty that he was untouchable, his belief that no one could challenge him. My voice cracked. "He will be angry." Dr. Emerson met my eyes squarely. "That is not your burden to carry. It is his actions that brought us here, not yours." I stared at him. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. Not without judgment, not without expectation, not without control. A tear slid down my cheek, hot and humiliating. The nurse reached out and gently wiped it away with a tissue. "You did nothing wrong." She said it so plainly, so confidently, that it felt like a foreign language. Footsteps sounded again. "He is on his way out," a voice said quietly from the hallway. Security asked him to wait outside the building. I stiffened. My father was still here. Not allowed inside, but close. Too close. My heartbeat quickened. The nurse noticed my panic. "Hannah, listen to me," she said firmly. "You are safe. He cannot come in. He is being watched. We will not let anything happen to you." My chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. My fingers curled into the blanket. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to let her words soak into me and replace the fear that had lived in my bones since childhood. But belief takes time. Safety takes even longer. The curtain rustled again, and a uniformed officer stepped inside. Clipboard in hand expression, serious but kind. "Ms. Whitmore, I am Officer Ruiz. I need to ask you some questions about what brought you here tonight." The nurse stayed beside me. The doctor remained at the foot of the bed, and for the first time in my life, I felt something unfamiliar forming inside me, a fragile, trembling seed of strength. I exhaled and spoke the truth the way I should have years ago. My father hurt me. Officer Ruiz pulled a small metal chair closer to my bedside, the legs scraping softly against the tile. He sat down without invading my space, leaving a respectful distance between us. His partner, a slightly older woman with a calm expression and dark hair pulled into a tight bun, stepped in and stood near the curtain, arms relaxed but alert. I caught the name on her badge, Officer Bennett. The presence of both officers made my chest tighten, not because I feared them, but because I knew the truth I was about to speak would change the course of my life in a way I could never reverse. Ruiz clicked his pen and opened the clipboard. "Hannah," he said gently, "I want you to know we are here to help you. You are in control of this conversation. If you need a break, tell us. If you do not understand something, tell us." He paused. "We are not here to judge you. We are here to understand what happened and make sure you are safe." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. My father's voice echoed in the back of my mind the way it always had whenever authority came into the picture. "You never embarrass this family. You keep your mouth shut. You do not talk to cops." Officer Bennett stepped slightly closer, her posture open, her expression soft. She spoke in a tone so gentle that it nearly undid me. "This will stay between us and the report. We are not here to expose you. We are here because someone hurt you, and it is our job to protect you from further harm." Protect me. The phrase felt so foreign I almost did not understand it. No one had ever protected me from him, not even when I was a child, not even when I needed it most. Ruiz cleared his throat. "We need to start from the beginning. Tell me what you remember." I drew in a shaky breath. The pain pulsing behind my eyes made it hard to think clearly, but the memories were already flooding back whether I wanted them or not. "I was at my father's house for dinner," I began, my voice weak. "My family was all there. My father, my brother Brad, my stepmother, Linda." He nodded. "And was there tension in the room when you arrived?" A short, humorless laugh escaped me. "There is always tension in that house." He gave me a sympathetic look. "And did something happen during dinner that led to a confrontation?" I swallowed. "Yes." My father became angry. He asked what I came to tell them. He got upset because he thought I was hiding something. "Did he threaten you?" Ruiz asked. His tone was steady, but his jaw tightened ever so slightly. Not verbally, not directly, but his voice. I hesitated. His voice has always been enough. Bennett stepped in. "When you say enough, what do you mean?" Her question was soft but precise. My skin prickled. "I mean, I grew up with him yelling. I know the tone he uses before he loses control. And he used that tone tonight." Ruiz leaned in just enough to show he was listening. "Can you describe what happened next?" I tightened my grip on the edge of the blanket. He stood up, fast, and he slammed his hand on the table. The sound, it scared me. It always scares me. Bennett nodded slowly. "Did you feel threatened at that point?" "Yes, because I knew what was coming." He walked toward me. He started shouting that I had no right to speak without permission, that I should not stand up, that I should not act like I had something important to say. Ruiz wrote everything down with deliberate care. And then, I inhaled shakily. He hit me. The words came out so small and hollow that I barely recognized my own voice. Ruiz did not react with shock, though I saw his eyes harden. "Officers hear this more often than anyone should." But Bennett's expression shifted, not in disbelief, but in sadness. "I am so sorry," she said quietly. "No one should ever lay a hand on you." My throat tightened. I looked down. He slapped me across the face. It was hard enough that I fell back into the cabinet, hard enough that I lost consciousness. Ruiz exchanged a glance with Bennett. "And before today, had your father ever physically harmed you?" The question hung heavy in the air. Memories flashed through my mind. The wall-shaking slams, the threats, the hands grabbing my arms, the times he got close enough that I felt his breath on my face as he told me to remember my place. But he had never hit me like this. Not full force. Not until tonight. Not until the moment I tried to speak freely. "No," I said. "Not like this." The way I said it told them everything they needed to know. He had not hit me before, but he had harmed me in ways that did not always leave bruises. Ruiz set his pen down. "Hannah, based on your injuries and your description of the event, this is considered domestic assault." "It is a criminal offense. We will be filing charges." My breath hitched. My stomach dropped. Charges. Against my father. Something inside me twisted in a painful, panicked knot. What will happen to him? Ruiz kept his voice steady. That will depend on the district attorney and the evidence we submit. The medical report already supports your account, and we will interview the others who were present. I felt heat rush to my face. Brad will lie, I whispered. He always lies for my father. Linda might tell the truth, but I do not know if she will. Ruiz nodded. We are prepared for that, but the evidence is already strong, and we have reason to believe you are in danger if you return home. We will be issuing an emergency protective order. My chest tightened. A protective order. Against my father. It felt unreal, like words I had heard in television shows about other people, not something directed toward me. Bennett pulled a small card from her pocket and set it gently on the rolling tray beside me. On it were hotline numbers, resources, and the name of a domestic violence advocacy group. You are not alone in this, she said. I stared at the card as if it were written in a language I had never learned. Ruiz stood. We have what we need for now. We will return with follow-up questions, but you should rest. Medical staff will keep security posted outside your room. My heart pounded. Security. Because of him. Because he was still somewhere outside the hospital pacing or fuming or planning. Bennett stepped a little closer. You are safe tonight, Hannah. He cannot come anywhere near you. You have our word. She said it firmly, like a vow. Something inside me cracked open. Relief, fear, grief, all tangled together. For the first time in my life, someone believed me without hesitation. Someone stood between me and him. I let out a shaky breath. Thank you. Ruiz nodded. We will be back soon. The officers stepped out the curtain, falling gently behind them. The room fell quiet again, but the silence felt different now. Not heavy, not suffocating. Just still. My head pulsed, my chest ached, but beneath the pain was something else. The first faint outline of a truth I had never dared to hold. I was not the problem. He was. I did not sleep that night. The hospital room was dim except for the soft glow of the monitor beside me, its rhythmic beeping, a reminder that I was still here, still breathing, still tethered to a reality I was struggling to make sense of. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting the IV, asking if I needed anything for the pain. But none of it reached the deeper ache settled inside my chest. By morning, a different kind of knock sounded at the door. Not hesitant, not frantic. Firm. Professional. A woman stepped inside wearing a charcoal suit that fit her with the kind of precision that comes from years of standing her ground in rooms filled with men who believe they cannot be challenged. She had dark hair in a sleek bob, sharp eyes softened only by a small flicker of empathy. She closed the door behind her and walked toward my bed. Hannah Whitmore. Her voice was steady. I am Marissa Hale. The hospital contacted me through the domestic violence advocate on staff. They said you needed legal representation. I blinked in confusion. I did not ask for a lawyer. No, she said gently, but you need one. And I am here to help. She pulled a chair closer and sat with perfect posture, legs crossed, a legal pad resting on her knee. There was something grounding about her presence, like she carried her own atmosphere of clarity. She studied me for a moment. You sustained a serious injury. The doctors documented swelling on your CT scan. You have visible bruising along the left side of your face and jawline consistent with an open-handed strike. She said it with clinical precision, not dramatics. And not pity. I found myself staring at her. How do you already know all of this? Medical staff briefed me with your permission. You were unconscious, so permission was implied under emergency protocol. I felt a swirl of emotions, vulnerability, fear, relief. I nodded. She flipped open a folder. I read the officer's notes as well. They believe you are at risk if you return home. They have submitted a request for an emergency protective order. My throat tightened. My father. She looked directly into my eyes. Hannah, what happened to you is domestic violence. Your father assaulted you. I looked away sharply. Her words were blunt, but not cruel. Just real. Too real, I whispered. He has never done that before. She tilted her head slightly. Not like this. That tells me something important. Abusers rarely begin at full escalation. They test boundaries. They push limits. They use fear long before they use force. I felt exposed, as if she could see every memory I had buried. Your father has conditioned you to believe that silence keeps you safe, she continued. You were trained to anticipate his moods to please him, to avoid conflict. That is why confronting this feels unbearable. You think speaking the truth makes you disloyal. My eyes burned. I blinked rapidly, but the tears spilled anyway. I am not trying to destroy him, she nodded. Domestic violence survivors rarely are. They want the abuse to stop. They want their pain to be acknowledged, but they do not walk into this wanting revenge. That is a myth. Her voice lowered. But what he did to you was a crime. I flinched. A crime. Hearing it phrased that way made my stomach twist. She leaned forward slightly. Tell me what you remember. I swallowed hard. I was at dinner. I had something to tell them. Something big. But he got angry before I could say it. Angry how? His tone changed. His voice went into that mode I know, the one he uses right before he snaps. And when you say snaps, what does that usually look like? I hesitated. For most people, it is yelling. For him, it is control. He steps closer. He slams his hand on things. He demands obedience. She nodded slowly. And this time, he hit me. The words trembled out of me. He hit me across the face. Hard enough that my head hit the cabinet. She wrote something down, but her expression softened. That must have been terrifying. I felt my voice break. It was. She stopped writing. Hannah, look at me. I lifted my eyes. You did not deserve that. You did nothing to provoke that. This is not your fault. The certainty in her tone disarmed me. For 34 years, I had been conditioned to believe everything was my fault. My failures, my reactions, my words, my tone, my existence. And now, here she was dismantling that entire belief system with a single sentence. I wiped my cheeks. What happens now? She flipped the folder shut. First, we let the medical documentation speak for itself. Then we let the officers finish their report. After that, the district attorney will determine charges. Domestic assault is not something they overlook. My heart pounded. Will he go to jail? It depends on many factors. His history, the severity of injuries, witness statements, whether he admits responsibility. I shook my head. He will never admit anything. She gave a knowing smile. They rarely do, but legal outcomes do not depend on his honesty. They depend on evidence, and based on what I have seen so far, you have a strong case. A wave of fear washed over me. He is going to be so angry. She leaned in. Anger is his pattern, not your responsibility. He is accountable for his actions, not you. The door creaked softly. A nurse peeked in. Sorry to interrupt. Visiting hours are beginning soon. I froze. Visiting hours? My father was in the building earlier. Could he come in? Could he find a way past security? Could he stand over my bed again? My breath quickened. Marissa noticed immediately. She stood, her voice firm. Is there security outside her door? The nurse nodded. Yes. The attending physician approved it. Her father is not allowed on this floor. Marissa crossed her arms, assessing me. You are safe. Repeat that if you must. You are safe. I swallowed hard. It did not feel true yet, but I wanted it to. She sat back down. Now, Hannah, we need to talk about something just as important as the legal process, the psychological aftermath. I felt a tremor in my chest. You have spent years understanding danger through your father's reactions. Your body is trained to read him like a storm. That conditioning does not disappear in one night. You will feel guilt, confusion, fear, even loyalty. All of those emotions are normal for survivors. I felt tears rising again. I already feel guilty. Of course you do, because your father taught you that his rage was your responsibility, but it was not, and it never will be. She placed her hands gently on the bed rail. This moment is the beginning of you reclaiming your voice, your truth, your life. You are not weak for being afraid. You are not dramatic for telling the truth. You are not disloyal for protecting yourself. She exhaled softly. Domestic violence steals your ability to trust yourself. This process will give it back. A long, trembling breath escaped me. What do I do next? Rest, she said. Let the police handle their part. Let the evidence speak, and when you are ready, we will prepare for the next steps together. She stood gathering her notes. You are not alone anymore, Hannah. Not legally, not psychologically, not in any sense that matters. She walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at me. Your father's control ends here, with you, and with the truth. The door clicked softly behind her as she left, leaving me in the quiet room with a truth so heavy and so freeing it made my chest ache. I was not the problem. I was not to blame. And for the first time in my life, someone was standing between me and the man who had shaped my fear. Morning sunlight leaked weakly through the blinds of my hospital room, casting pale stripes across my blanket, but the brightness did nothing to warm the cold that had settled inside me. By the time Marissa returned with a stack of documents under her arm, the investigation had already begun moving like a slow, deliberate tide. She pulled a chair close to my bed again, her expression more serious than before. Things are moving quickly, she said. The police spoke to your stepmother early this morning. My breath caught. Linda. What did she say? Marissa studied me for a moment. Her voice was shaky, but she told the truth. Not all of it, but enough to confirm that your father was escalating throughout the evening. My chest tightened. Did she say he hit me? Not directly. She said she heard yelling. She heard the table slam, and she said she heard you fall. She paused, but she did not say she saw the strike. My stomach twisted. Of course she did not. She had lived under his control for years. Her silence was survival. Marissa continued. The officers did not push her. They know trauma victims freeze. What matters is that her testimony supports your account. Did they talk to Brad? I whispered. Marissa took a slow breath as if preparing me. Yes. And he defended your father. I closed my eyes, feeling the sting of a truth I had always known but never wanted to face. Of course he did. He said your father would never hit you. He claimed you overreacted. He said you tripped. A hollow laugh escaped me. That sounds like him. Marissa nodded. The police expected it. But something interesting happened during his interview. He hesitated. Once. Just once. But it was enough for the officers to note. I frowned. Hesitated how? She leaned forward slightly. When they asked him if he saw the moment you fell, he froze for a second, like he was remembering something he wished he had not seen, or something he did not want to admit. A strange pressure settled in my chest, a mixture of anger and a flicker of hope. Maybe he had a conscience buried deep beneath the loyalty my father demanded. Maybe not. The door opened again and Officer Ruiz entered holding a small flash drive sealed inside an evidence bag. His expression was different today, sharper, more focused. He greeted me with a nod before turning to Marissa. You should see this, too. He handed her the evidence bag. She held it up carefully. What is this? Ruiz exhaled. Audio from a kitchen camera. My heart lurched. A camera? In the kitchen? I stared at him. I did not know there were cameras. Ruiz nodded. Most people do not know when they have been installed. Your father had one near the ceiling above the pantry. It did not capture video at the right angle to show the strike, but it recorded audio. My pulse hammered, and Ruiz looked at me with a level seriousness that made my fingers tremble. It captured yelling, table impact, a slap, a fall. My breath caught in my chest. You could hear it, he nodded, clearly, and you could hear your voice. You said, Dad, please just listen. His expression darkened, and you can hear your father shouting at you. The words are aggressive, controlling, enough to establish intent. The room felt too small for a moment. I looked at Marissa. She already had the calm, focused look of someone building a strategy in real time. This changes things, she murmured. This is strong evidence. Very strong. Ruiz continued. We also looked at the pattern of furniture movement, The chair he knocked over left marks on the hardwood floor. The overturned platter matched your stepmother's description. The physical scene lines up with the audio. I swallowed hard. What about my father? Ruiz's expression hardened. He denied everything. Claimed you were emotional. Claimed you tripped on the floor. Claimed he tried to help you. I felt a cold anger bloom in my chest, the kind of anger that comes from finally seeing the truth without the fog of fear. He always lies. Ruiz nodded. And we always look at the evidence. Based on everything we have collected, the district attorney has approved preliminary domestic assault charges. My breath hitched. Already. Yes. And one more thing. He pulled a printed photograph from his folder. The image showed my face bruised along the jawline and cheek, the discoloration already forming in a pattern unmistakably shaped by a hand. This was taken 30 minutes ago, he said. Medical documentation confirms the shape and angle of the bruise match an open-handed strike from someone standing over you. My stomach churned. Seeing it made the truth impossible to escape. He continued, We interviewed the paramedics as well. They said your father was pacing outside the house when they arrived. He appeared agitated. He would not let them inside at first. I felt my heart stop for a second. He would not let them inside. They had to push past him, Ruiz said quietly. And when they did, they found you unconscious on the floor. The room spun slightly. Marissa glanced at me, reading my expression. You are processing trauma and truth at the same time. That is overwhelming for anyone, especially someone who grew up under control. I took a shaky breath. What happens next? Ruiz spoke carefully. Your father has been served with the emergency protective order. He is not allowed within 100 yards of you. He must surrender any firearms, and he is being ordered to appear in court for arraignment. I stared at him. Is he in custody? Not yet, but he will be monitored closely. If he violates the order, he will be arrested immediately. Fear twisted in my gut. He will be furious. Marissa put a steadying hand on my blanket. Anger is not your responsibility. His consequences are not your burden. She looked at Ruiz. Have you spoken to the stepmother again? He nodded. She requested to speak privately with an officer. My breath caught. Why? Ruiz hesitated. Then he spoke gently. She said she has been afraid of him for years. She said he has threatened her before. And last night. She paused before telling us that she hid in the hallway because she feared he would turn on her next. A lump formed in my throat. That was the first time someone admitted fear that reflected my own. Ruiz continued. She said something else. Something you should know. My heart thudded painfully. What did she say? He met my eyes. She said she has never seen you stand up for yourself like you did last night. She said you were brave. My breath stuttered. Brave. I never thought that word could apply to me. Marissa closed her folder. Hannah, your family is fracturing because the truth is finally being forced into the light. That is painful. That is destabilizing. But it is also the beginning of justice. The beginning of healing. I let her words sink in. For the first time, I felt the edges of a new reality forming. A reality where my father could no longer control the narrative. A reality where his anger could not drown out my voice. A reality where my truth mattered. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, though the air conditioning hummed steadily above the wooden benches, but emotionally. There was a kind of sterile detachment to the space that made every sound sharper, every movement more deliberate. The walls were painted in muted tones, the American flag positioned neatly behind the judge's bench, and the seal of the state hanging directly above it like a silent witness. I sat beside Marissa at the plaintiff's table, my palms pressed flat against my thighs to stop their trembling. She had told me this hearing would be brief, procedural, nothing dramatic. But the word brief meant nothing when the man who had shaped my fear for 34 years was about to walk into the same room. My heart hammered so loudly I felt it in my throat. Ruiz and Bennett waited in the back row, ready to intervene if anything escalated. I kept my eyes on the table in front of me, afraid that if I looked at the door, I would crumble. Marissa placed a hand on my arm. Remember, this hearing is not about determining guilt. It is about ensuring the court recognizes the evidence and upholds the protective order. You are safe. The judge will not tolerate any aggression from him." I nodded, but my breath still felt trapped in my chest. A bailiff stepped forward and opened the side door. "All rise." The judge entered first, an older woman with silver hair pulled into a bun and glasses that perched squarely on the edge of her nose. She moved with the purposeful confidence of someone who had seen every kind of human ugliness and refused to be shaken by any of it. But it was the next figure who turned my blood cold. My father walked in wearing a pressed shirt and slacks, the picture of discipline and control he had always presented to the outside world. His posture was rigid, his chin lifted in the way he used to when inspecting soldiers during his military years. To a stranger, he looked like a respectable, stern man. To me, he looked like a storm waiting for a place to strike. His gaze swept the room and landed on me with laser precision. Something dark flickered across his face, something between rage and disbelief. He did not expect me to be sitting upright. He did not expect me to have representation. He did not expect me to fight. He sat at the defendant's table, his attorney already waiting beside him, a tall man in a gray suit with a polished confidence that made my stomach tighten. The judge settled into her chair. "You may be seated." The room lowered as one. The clerk began reading the case file. State of Colorado versus Richard Whitmore. Allegation of domestic assault, domestic violence enhancement, and violation of peace within the home. The words hung in the air like a verdict already forming. My father's jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitch from across the room. His attorney leaned toward him, whispering something, but my father's eyes never left me. Not once. The judge adjusted her glasses. "Counsel, I have reviewed the preliminary evidence, the police report, and the medical documentation. I will now hear brief statements from both sides." My father's attorney stood first. "Your Honor, my client is a respected member of the community, a former serviceman with no criminal record." The incident in question was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. He motioned toward my father with a subtle flourish. Mr. Whitmore attempted to assist his daughter after she slipped. The injuries sustained were accidental. My chest tightened. The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. He continued. The family was having a heated discussion. Emotions ran high. But there is no evidence of intentional harm, no history of violence, just a tragic misinterpretation. Marissa stood slowly, placing both hands on the table before addressing the judge. "Your Honor, the evidence contradicts every claim just made. The CT scan shows an impact consistent with a blunt strike, not a fall. The bruising pattern on Ms. Whitmore's face matches the outline of a hand. There is audio evidence of aggressive yelling object impact and the sound of a slap followed by a fall. She let the silence linger. And Ms. Whitmore was unconscious for 4 minutes. That is not a misunderstanding. That is violence." The judge nodded, her expression unreadable but attentive. My father finally spoke. His voice was smooth, controlled, the same tone he used whenever he wanted to appear rational. "Your Honor, I love my daughter. I would never lay a hand on her. She has always been dramatic. She misinterprets things." A tremor ran through me. Marissa's jaw tightened. The judge turned her gaze toward my father. "Mr. Whitmore, there is a protective order in place. You are not to address the plaintiff directly or indirectly. Do you understand?" His nostrils flared. "Yes, Your Honor." She continued. "And I will remind you that minimizing the victim's experience is often indicative of coercive control." My father stiffened. That remark struck him deeply. The judge motioned to Ruiz, who stepped forward and handed her a printed transcript of the audio recording. She scanned the page briefly, then looked up, her expression sharpening. I hear aggression raised volume and a clear sound of impact. She turned to my father. "You claim she slipped. Explain the yelling." He swallowed. "We argued. Families argue. Explain the slap." His jaw worked. "I did not slap her." "Explain the fall. She lost her balance." "Explain the unconsciousness." "She panicked and fainted." The judge stared at him with an expression that bordered on disbelief. She rested her hand on the file. "I have presided over domestic violence cases for 25 years. Patterns are patterns for a reason. She turned to Marissa. Counsel, do you have anything further? Yes, Your Honor. Marissa rose. The defendant shows clear signs of controlling behavior. He denied emergency responders access to the home. He attempted to manipulate the narrative before paramedics could assess the scene. He also has a documented pattern of verbal intimidation toward both Ms. Whitmore and her stepmother. The judge nodded. Thank you. She then turned her full attention to my father. Mr. Whitmore, this court is deeply concerned by your conduct. The emergency protective order will remain in effect. You are to have no contact with Ms. Whitmore. You will submit to a mandatory anger management evaluation. My father's eyes widened. I could see humiliation turning into rage. His attorney whispered urgently, trying to keep him composed. The judge continued, Your arraignment is scheduled for 2 weeks. Failure to appear or comply will result in immediate arrest. Do you understand? My father's face contorted as he fought to control himself. Yes. His voice cracked on the single syllable. The judge lifted her gavel. Then, let it be clear. This court takes domestic violence seriously. The consequences of your actions begin now. The gavel struck wood. My father flinched. Something inside me shifted. For the first time in my life, someone with authority had told him no. Not me. Someone he could not intimidate or overpower. The courtroom buzzed softly as people stood. Ruiz and Bennett approached to check on me. Marissa placed a hand on my back. You did well. I felt my breath shake. My father stared at me as officers guided him toward the exit, his expression a twisted mixture of shock and fury and disbelief. But beneath that rage, for the first time, I saw something else. Fear. The courthouse hallway emptied slowly, people drifting away in murmurs, but I stayed seated on the wooden bench outside the courtroom, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles ached. Marissa stood a few feet away, speaking quietly with Ruiz. Her posture composed, her tone steady. The world should have felt calmer after the hearing. Safer. More certain. Instead, a new kind of tension gnawed at me, something deeper than fear, something heavier than anger. A question that had been tightening around my ribs since the moment the judge struck the gavel. Why? Why had he snapped like that? Why had he gone from shouting to violence in a matter of seconds? Why had the sight of me standing with an envelope in my hand provoked him more than anything else in my life ever had? I had spent years believing every explosion from him was about control, about pride, about power. But something about last night felt different, more frantic, more desperate, as if he had been afraid, not angry afraid. Something else, something he would never admit. I stared down at my hands, remembering the way he looked at the envelope. Not with curiosity, not with confusion, with something close to panic. The hallway door creaked open and Linda stepped inside, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. She froze when she saw me, eyes widening with a mix of guilt and sorrow. I stiffened instinctively. She approached slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. Hannah. I swallowed hard. I did not know if I wanted her comfort or her truth. Maybe both, maybe neither. She sat down beside me, leaving a careful space between us. Her eyes glistened under the hallway lights. I am so sorry, she whispered. I should have done more. I should have stepped in. I should have told the police. Everything. I looked at her. Why did he do it? Why did he snap like that? It was the first time I asked it out loud. Linda hesitated, her fingers tightening around the strap of her purse. Because you stood up, she said softly. You stood up in a way he did not expect. I shook my head. That cannot be the whole reason. She exhaled shakily, her voice barely holding together. You do not understand your father the way I do. He cannot stand it when someone in the family shows independence, especially you. My stomach twisted. Why me? She looked at me with sad, tired eyes. Because you are the only one he cannot control completely. That made my breath catch. She continued, he controls Brad through approval. He controls me through fear. But you slipped away from him. You built a life. You moved out. You found stability. You survived without his help. He hates when you succeed. He hates when you have something of your own." A tremor ran through me. "But I did not even tell him what the good news was." Linda nodded slowly. "That is exactly why he snapped. He saw it in your eyes. He saw hope. He saw confidence. And he cannot tolerate the idea of you having something powerful enough to change your life. Something he cannot take credit for. Something he cannot control." Her voice thinned with emotion. "He has always been afraid of you becoming free." A shudder ran through me. The envelope, the one thing he could not predict, the one thing he had no control over. Linda looked away, her eyes shining with memories she tried to hide. Years ago, she whispered he reacted the same way when I told him I wanted to take a night class. I frowned, startled. "He got angry because of a class." She nodded. "He said I was being ungrateful, that I was trying to outgrow him, that I thought I was better. He made it impossible for me to go. He made me believe I was wrong for wanting more." Her hands trembled in her lap. "Your father cannot stand when the people around him expand, when they step into something new, when they find light. He lives in a world where he is the center and everything else must orbit him or be destroyed." My heart pounded. So he hit me because he thought I was getting away from him? "No." Her voice cut through the hallway air with quiet intensity. "He hit you because he knew you already had." Tears burned behind my eyes. "He lost control the moment he realized he could no longer control you." She nodded. "There was fear in him last night. Not fear of losing you, fear of losing power over you. That hit me harder than the blow itself." Linda's voice dropped to a whisper. "There is one more thing you need to know." My breath caught. The real reason he panicked when he saw that envelope. My pulse surged. "What reason?" She swallowed hard. "He called Brad into his office 2 days ago. He told him he was worried you were becoming too independent, that you were asking fewer questions, that you seemed confident lately. He thought you were planning something." "Planning what?" She hesitated. "To leave the family. He believed you were going to walk out of his life entirely." My mind reeled. "All I did was show up for dinner." She nodded sadly. "But he saw something different. He saw you arriving with purpose, with a straight posture, with a calmness he could not shake off. He felt it slipping. His control, his dominance, his narrative. And when you reached into your coat for that envelope," her voice cracked, "he saw proof. Proof that you had something powerful, something he did not approve, something he did not authorize. He panicked. He lashed out. Because that is what men like him do when they are confronted with the one thing they cannot tolerate: change." My breath trembled. So all this time, and it was not about disrespect. It was not about the argument. It was not even about the envelope. She shook her head. "It was about your strength. The strength you did not even know you carried. The strength he recognized before you did." A tear slipped down her cheek. "And he punished you for it." The hallway seemed to tilt the world, narrowing to a single truth I had never allowed myself to see. He hurt me not because I was weak, but because I was becoming strong. Marissa returned later that afternoon, carrying her leather briefcase and a cup of hospital coffee. She warned me was terrible before she even sat down. She placed the cup on the rolling tray beside me, folded her hands in her lap, and studied me with an expression that was firm but patient. "You look like you have something on your mind," she said quietly. I inhaled slowly. My throat tightened with nerves, but it was different from the fear I felt around my father. This was the kind of tension that came before a truth too heavy to keep carrying alone. "There is something I have not told anyone," I said. Her posture shifted, sharpening with attention. "Something important. Important how?" I reached for the envelope sitting on the bedside table. The once crisp edges were slightly bent now, creased from the fall, from the chaos, from everything that had happened since. My fingers trembled as I held it. Marissa watched me carefully. "You do not have to show me anything until you are ready." I swallowed. "I am ready." I opened the envelope slowly, the paper whispering against my skin. I pulled out the lottery claim confirmation slip, the official-looking document with my name printed across the top, the bold numbers beneath it, the seal, the signature. Everything that had last night felt like a miracle. Marissa's eyes flicked to the paper, then widened. "Is that what I think it is?" I nodded. "I won the Powerball. $50 million. The words left my mouth and hung in the air like something unreal. Marissa blinked once, twice, then leaned closer. "Hannah, that is life-changing." My breath shook. "I know, and you were going to tell your family." "Yes." I let out a long exhale. I thought it would be a good moment, something to celebrate, something to bring us together. She stared at me, her expression softening with empathy so deep it almost hurt to look at. "You wanted to share your happiness with people who have never known what to do with your joy." The truth of that hit me so hard I had to look away. She reached out and gently touched the back of my hand. "Hannah, listen to me. It is not your fault for wanting belonging. It is not your fault for hoping they would respond with love." She paused. "And it is certainly not your fault that he responded with violence." My throat tightened. I had imagined last night so differently. I had pictured smiles, shock, maybe even a hug. I had pictured the first moment in my life when my father might look at me with pride. I never said it out loud, but the longing had been real. Too real. Marissa sat back and took in the paper again. "Have you claimed the winnings?" "Yes. The confirmation came earlier that morning. The funds will be released to me in installments unless I choose the lump sum, and no one knows but you." I nodded. Not my friends, not my co-workers, and definitely not my family. She let out a slow breath. That was wise? I almost laughed. Wise. Nothing about last night had felt wise. I pressed the slip between my fingers. I wanted to tell them. I wanted to share it. I thought it would change how they saw me. She shook her head gently. "It would have changed everything. Just not in the way you hoped." I looked at her sharply. "What do you mean? Hannah, people like your father do not respond to empowerment with pride. They respond with fear, fear of losing control, fear of their power fading, fear of the person they have dominated stepping into a life beyond their reach." She tilted her head. "So, your lottery win was a symbol that you were no longer someone he could contain, a symbol that your life could expand in ways he could never dictate." My breath trembled. So he sensed it, without knowing what it was. She nodded. Abusers have a brutal instinct for detecting the moment their victim begins to grow beyond them. They feel the shift long before it becomes visible, and when they feel it, they react with force. I stared down at the paper in my hand. $50 million. Money that could move mountains. Money that could build a new life. Money that had almost cost me my life before I even revealed it. Marissa leaned forward. "Hannah, I need to ask a difficult but important question." I nodded slowly. "Do you want your family to know?" I froze. The silence stretched between us. I thought about my father's eyes last night, wild with anger. I thought about Brad's smirk. I thought about Linda's trembling guilt. I thought about the years I had wasted trying to earn their approval. I thought about the bruise on my face and the ache in my skull. And then I thought about the life I could build without them. A life where my joy was not a threat. A life where my voice was not a problem. A life where my father's control was not the axis my world spun around. Finally, I exhaled. "No." Marissa nodded as if she had expected that answer. "Then we keep this information confidential. I will secure the document in your legal file. You will store the original in a safe deposit box. No one but us will know until you decide otherwise." Relief washed through me so suddenly I almost collapsed into the pillow behind me. She continued, "You must understand something. This money does not make you obligated to your family. It does not require forgiveness. It does not erase what happened. It gives you choices. Choices your father never wanted you to have." My eyes burned. I wiped the corner of one with the back of my hand. "I feel guilty," I whispered. She shook her head. "That reaction is normal. You have been conditioned to center his emotions above your own. But this money is not a weapon. It is freedom. It is the first thing in your life that is truly yours." A tear slid down my cheek. I do not know how to handle that kind of freedom. She gave a small smile. You will learn, and I will help you. She tapped the envelope. For now, we keep this between us. You focus on healing, on the legal case, on reclaiming your life. I looked at the paper again. Something inside me shifted. Something fragile but powerful. For the first time in my life, my future did not feel like something someone else controlled. It felt like something waiting for me to step into. And when I finally met Marissa's eyes, I realized the truth she had been leading me toward all along. The biggest change of last night was not that my father lost control. It was that I finally found mine. The courthouse felt different the day of the arraignment, heavier somehow, as if the walls themselves understood that today carried weight. Today was not just a procedural hearing like before. Today was the day the evidence would be laid out, the charges spoken aloud in front of him, the truth pinned to the air where he could not twist it into something that served him. Marissa walked beside me as we moved through the security checkpoint, her heels tapping a steady rhythm on the polished floor. You are ready, she said. I do not feel ready. Feeling ready and being ready are not the same thing. You are ready. Her certainty steadied me, even if only slightly. The courtroom door opened with a low creak. Inside, reporters were seated near the back. Not many, but enough to make my breath tighten. Domestic assault cases rarely drew attention unless something unusual was involved. Maybe it was his military status. Maybe it was the audio recording. Or maybe it was simply that people sensed the story was bigger than a dinner gone wrong. My father was already at the defense table wearing the same mask of dignity he always wore in public. His shirt was pressed, his hair neatly combed, his face set in the expression of a misunderstood patriarch. But something had changed. His posture was stiff, too stiff, like the mask was cracking underneath. He looked up as I entered, his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my pulse jump. Rage simmered beneath his surface, barely contained. But there was something else there, too. Something he had never shown me before. Fear. I sat down beside Marissa. She placed a hand lightly on my arm, grounding me. Ruiz and Bennett positioned themselves behind us, a reassuring presence. The judge entered. We rose. We sat. The proceedings began. The district attorney, a woman named Clara Chin with sharp eyes and a sharper instinct for truth, approached the podium. Your Honor, the state of Colorado brings forward the following charges against the defendant Richard Whitmore. She read the list slowly, each word landing like a stone dropped into water. Domestic assault, domestic violence enhancement, reckless endangerment, obstruction of emergency personnel, violation of peace within the home. My father's jaw twitched. His attorney rose with theatrical indignation. Your Honor, these charges are inflated. My client is a decorated veteran. He has served his country with honor. He would never harm his daughter. The judge held up a hand, her expression unimpressed. Save your statements for argument, counsel. The DA stepped forward again. The state would like to present its preliminary evidence. Permission granted. She began with the medical documentation, the CT scan, the concussion, the bruising, the swelling, the measurements, the angles, the photos, the sterile clinical truth of it all. The courtroom fell silent except for the turning of pages. Then the audio recording. The moment the first shout echoed through the speakers, something inside me twisted violently. Hearing it again, his voice, my voice, the slap, the crash made my stomach churn. Brad, seated behind my father, shifted uncomfortably. Linda kept her eyes glued to the floor. The DA let the audio finish, then looked up. The sound of an open-handed strike is unmistakable. The timing aligns with the fall, the medical injuries, and the paramedic report. My father's attorney practically leapt to his feet. Your Honor, audio alone does not prove intent, or that the defendant struck her. The judge's expression did not change. Sit down. He froze mid-protest and slowly lowered himself back into his chair. The DA continued. We also have testimony from Mrs. Linda Whitmore. The courtroom shifted as all eyes turned toward her. Linda stood trembling slightly, but her voice held steady. I heard yelling. I heard the table slam. I heard Hannah fall. She paused, then added with a quiver, I was afraid he would hurt me too. A ripple moved through the room. My father's expression cracked. He glared at her with betrayal sharp enough to cut. She lowered her gaze again, but the damage was done. Marissa rose next, her tone calm, but powerful. Your Honor, the defendant has a documented history of coercive control. He uses intimidation to silence his family. He attempted to block paramedics from entering the home. He attempted to manipulate the narrative before a medical assessment could be made. This is not the behavior of an innocent man. It is the behavior of an abuser. The judge nodded. Thank you, counsel. My father's attorney rose once more. Your Honor, if I may speak to my client's character? No. The judge cut him off cleanly. Character does not override evidence. She turned to my father. Mr. Whitmore, do you wish to address the court? He stood, slowly gripping the table for support. His voice quivered with outrage disguised as restraint. Your Honor, I raised my daughter. I provided for her. I disciplined her when necessary, but I have never harmed her. She is emotional. She exaggerates. She always has. The same tactic, the same script, the same attempt to reduce me to instability and imagination. But the judge did not look convinced. In fact, she looked irritated. I have heard enough. She lifted the file in front of her. The evidence strongly supports the state's charges. This court finds probable cause to proceed. My father's face paled. The judge continued, I will issue a continued no-contact order. The defendant will undergo mandatory anger management evaluation and surrender any firearms within 24 hours. Violation will result in immediate incarceration. His attorney tried to object, but she shut him down with a single raised hand. Finally, she turned to me. Ms. Whitmore, the court acknowledges the courage it takes to come forward in a case like this. The state will proceed to trial unless a plea agreement is reached. Please remain in contact with your advocate and legal counsel. I knotted my throat tight. The judge struck her gavel. The sound echoed through the room with a finality that sent a tremor through my chest. My father stood frozen. His fists clenched, his face twisted with disbelief and fury and humiliation. But he did not speak. He could not. Because for the first time in his life, his voice held no power. As the officers approached him, he finally looked at me. Not with dominance, not with authority, with fear. A fear I had once carried in my own bones. A fear that now belonged to him. And in that moment, watching him realize he could no longer bend the world to his will, something inside me finally loosened a weight I had been carrying for decades, lifting just enough for me to breathe again. The days after the arraignment unfolded with a strange, surreal clarity, as if life itself were adjusting to a new alignment, a world where my father was no longer the immovable center of everything. Marissa told me that consequences for abusers rarely arrive in a single moment. They come in layers, echoes, ripples, and that is exactly what happened. The first ripple came when my father returned home after the hearing. Word travels fast in small communities, especially ones filled with people who know how to read tension the way others read weather reports. Neighbors who once greeted him with stiff nods or forced respect now glanced away when he walked by. Some crossed the street entirely. Some whispered. Some stared with an expression that bordered on disappointment, even disgust. He had spent decades crafting the image of a stern but honorable veteran, the kind of man who kept his lawn trimmed with military precision and lectured other men about discipline and standards. Now the same people he had spent years impressing gave him looks that said, "We see you differently now." Brad told me this through a text message 3 days after the hearing. He wrote, "People are talking. This is bad." I stared at the message for a long time before replying with a single sentence. He did this to himself. Brad never responded. The second ripple hit harder. The local Veterans Association released a statement acknowledging that a member was under investigation for domestic violence and would be placed on temporary suspension pending legal proceedings. My father had chaired committees-led fundraisers, delivered speeches about honor. Losing his standing among them was a blow he would feel more deeply than any legal consequence. He called Brad repeatedly that night. Brad, who still lived half in admiration of him, half in fear. But even Brad could not spare him from the truth this time. The third ripple came from inside the house. Linda finally broke. She left the home 2 weeks after the arraignment and moved in with her sister in Fort Collins. She sent me a long message, the kind of message that looked like it had taken hours to write. She said she had lived in fear for years, that my father's control had chipped away at her until she no longer recognized herself. She apologized for not protecting me the night of the assault. She apologized for not protecting me years before that. She apologized for everything she had been too scared to stop. But the last line of her message stayed with me the most. I am free because you finally showed me how. That sentence settled in my chest like a warm ember. Not joy, not pride. Something deeper, something steadier. The fourth ripple came from my father's own unraveling. His attorney withdrew from the case after a heated argument in his office. Brad told me my father accused the lawyer of incompetence, betrayal, weakness, and several other things typical of men who cannot tolerate losing control. But the truth was obvious. No lawyer wanted to represent someone whose arrogance was greater than his innocence. Even fewer wanted to handle a domestic assault case with such clear evidence. The fifth ripple was the most unexpected. The district attorney offered him a plea deal, 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory anger management, no contact with me for 3 years, no firearm possession, no dismissal, no reduction to a lesser charge. The offer was firm. The DA's message was clear. This was mercy, and it would not be offered twice. My father rejected it, then accepted it 3 days later. According to Marissa, he had tried to negotiate, tried to reframe the narrative, tried to argue logic and pride and reputation. None of it worked. The DA did not bend. She had the evidence. She had the audio. She had the medical report. She had Linda's testimony. She had everything she needed. And my father had nothing but denial and anger. Watching him sign the paperwork felt surreal. He sat in the defendant's chair, his right hand gripping the pen, his jaw clenched so tight the muscles twitched. He tried to stay composed, but the humiliation radiated from him like heat. When he finished signing the documents, he looked up at the judge with an expression that bordered on hatred. The judge simply said, "Consequences are not optional. You made choices. Now you live with the result." My father said nothing. He did not glance at me. He did not speak. He simply stood and walked out of the courtroom, his shoulders stiff, his posture rigid, the air around him charged with a fury he could no longer unleash. The sixth ripple came quietly, almost invisibly. The world around him stepped back. People he once intimidated no longer lowered their voices when he approached. He had lost the most important thing to a man like him: authority. Without it, he looked smaller, diminished, human. I never thought I would see the day when the fear he projected into others finally reflected back at him. But the truth of it was undeniable. He was afraid. He did not fear the court. He did not fear the probation. He did not fear the hours of community service. He feared something else. He feared the loss of control over me, over Linda, over the narrative, over the carefully crafted identity he had maintained for years. And that fear hollowed him out from the inside. I heard from Brad that the Veterans Association voted unanimously to remove him permanently. I heard his gun collection was confiscated without incident. I heard he yelled for hours at empty walls in his house the week Linda left. I heard he had no one to yell at anymore. I heard he finally realized the truth. Control evaporates the moment the people around you stop believing in it. The final ripple came not from my father, but from within myself. For years I had believed that escaping him would require running away, cutting ties, disappearing. I never imagined that the real escape would come not from leaving, but from speaking, from telling the truth, from refusing to shrink. He had used fear to keep me small, but fear only works if you stay silent. And silence was something I would never surrender again. He lost his grip on me. On Linda, on Brad, on his image, on his power. Richard Whitmore had finally paid a price, not by going to prison, not by being dragged away in handcuffs, but by being stripped of the one thing he valued above everything else: control. The first morning I woke up in my new home, I did not recognize the feeling that pulsed quietly beneath my ribs. It was not fear, not dread, not the tense anticipation that had shaped every morning of my life until now. It was something softer, something spacious, something like peace. Sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor of my bedroom in boulder warm and golden, filtering through tall windows that overlooked the foothills. I sat up slowly, letting the silence settle around me like a blanket. No footsteps stomping down a hallway. No deep voice shouting orders. No simmering tension waiting to erupt. Just quiet. Just me. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and pressed my feet into the soft rug beneath me, grounding myself in the present. The air smelled faintly of cedar from the beams overhead. My new home still carried the scent of new beginnings. I stood and walked toward the window. Outside, early hikers were making their way along the trail below their backpacks bouncing gently as they moved. A couple walked a golden retriever along the ridge. The world seemed so ordinary and so extraordinary at the same time. I had bought this house in cash. That alone felt surreal. Marissa had helped me set up trusts, investments, and safeguards. I made sure my address was private. My mail forwarded to a secure location. My number changed my information, sealed behind legal protections my father could never breach. The $50 million did not change who I was, but it changed what I could choose. And choice, I realized, was something I had never truly had. I walked through the house, slowly touching surfaces as if reassuring myself that everything was real. The open kitchen with pale stone counters, the den with shelves waiting to be filled, the small reading nook with mountain views, and in the corner near the window, a small desk with a thin folder sitting on top. Linda's medical papers. The day she left my father, she moved in with her sister, but the situation was temporary. She was terrified of starting over, she told me. Terrified of renting an apartment alone. Terrified of being financially dependent again. Terrified of freedom because she did not know what it felt like. I had placed a down payment on a Colorado Springs townhouse for her 2 days ago. The deed would be transferred to her name when she was ready. No strings attached. When she learned what I had done, she burst into tears and whispered, "I did not know kindness could look like this." I left the folder on the desk and walked into the living room where floor-to-ceiling windows stretched toward the mountains. I curled up on the couch with a blanket around my shoulders and let myself breathe. Really breathe. Long, deep breaths that filled my lungs and expanded the space inside my chest. Healing was not linear. Marissa reminded me of that every time we met. Some days I woke up shaking, heart pounding from memories I could not control. Some nights I dreamed I was back in the kitchen, my father's shadow looming over me. But other days were like this morning, quiet, soft, whole. And those days were becoming more frequent. After the arraignment, the DA's office connected me with a domestic violence support group. The first time I walked into the room, I felt my breath catch in my throat. Women of all ages sat in a circle sipping coffee, their expressions tired but courageous. When I shared my story, their eyes softened with recognition. Not surprise, not disbelief, recognition. They knew the patterns, the control, the fear, the cycle. They knew what it was like to grow up learning how to read danger in a man's silence. They welcomed me into that circle like someone returning home. I had never belonged anywhere as deeply as I did in that room, and so, with part of my winnings, I partnered with a local nonprofit to create a fund specifically for women leaving abusive households. First month's rent, legal fees, groceries, childcare, transportation. Freedom, I learned, is expensive, so I made sure the cost would never keep someone trapped again. I named the fund quietly, anonymously, the Renewal Grant. And after signing this paperwork, I sat in my car and cried, not out of sadness, but out of the strange, overwhelming knowledge that I was finally giving the world what I once begged for: hope. A week later, I found myself standing in a cozy office near Pearl Street, shaking hands with a therapist who specialized in trauma recovery. She had warm eyes, silver streaks in her hair, and a voice that made my shoulders drop a little the moment she spoke. I told her everything. The fear, the guilt, the bruises that healed faster than the memories, the nightmares, the truth I had never allowed myself to say. I loved a father who had never loved me back in the same way. Saying it out loud felt like pulling a thorn from my own skin. Painful, necessary, liberating. She nodded gently and said, "Love and harm often coexist in abusive families, but love should not cost you safety." That sentence rewired something inside me. As I sat on my new couch in my new home, staring out at the mountains, I let her words settle deeper into my bones. Love should not cost safety. It took 34 years to understand that. With each passing day, I reclaimed parts of myself I did not know were missing. I learned to cook meals I enjoyed. I learned to take hikes without flinching at every twig snapping behind me. I learned to answer the phone without bracing for my father's voice. I learned to exist without permission. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, I began to feel something I had never felt in my entire life. I felt free. The money did not give me that freedom. It merely unlocked the door. I was the one who walked through it, and for the first time I could see a lifetime unfolding in front of me that was not dictated by fear or obligation or control. A life where my voice mattered. A life where my choices were my own. A life where my past no longer held the power to shape my future. The mountains outside glowed gold as the sun rose higher, spilling light across the horizon. I wrapped the blanket tighter around myself and whispered into the quiet of my new world, "I choose this life." Not the one he tried to force on me. Not the one shaped by fear. This life. My life. I did not expect the final step of my healing to come quietly. I had always imagined closure as something dramatic, a sudden breaking of chains or a moment of triumph loud enough to drown out every painful echo of the past. But the truth arrived differently. It came on an ordinary morning, wrapped in stillness subtle enough that I almost missed it as I sat on my back porch overlooking the Boulder foothills. The sun was just beginning to edge over the ridgeline, painting the sky with soft pinks and golds. I held a mug of tea between my palms, the steam curling into the crisp air, and breathed in the scent of pine drifting from the woods behind my house. It had been months since the arraignment, months since the plea deal, months since my father last looked at me with that twisted mixture of rage and disbelief, unable to comprehend that his voice no longer dictated the course of my life. I took a long sip of tea and felt the warmth settle into my hands. Healing is not a straight path, my therapist always reminded me. You revisit old wounds until they no longer hurt. She was right. Some mornings I still woke with my heart racing. Some nights I startled at shadows that resembled a silhouette that haunted me for 3 decades. But those moments came less often now. They faded faster, and the distance between them grew wider. A soft knock sounded at my front door. I set my mug down and walked through the house, each step echoing softly against the wooden floor. When I opened the door, Linda stood there bundled in a light jacket, her hair pulled back neatly. She looked healthier than I had ever seen her. Her shoulders no longer curled inward. Her eyes no longer darted around the room, searching for danger. She smiled gently. "Morning, Hannah. Morning. Come in." She stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the living room with quiet wonder. She had visited once before, shortly after she moved into her townhouse in Colorado Springs, but even now she still looked stunned that a home like this existed for me. For us. For anyone who had survived what we survived. I brewed her tea and we sat in the living room, the mountains framed by the wide windows behind us. Linda held her cup carefully, her fingers trembling just slightly. "There is something I wanted to tell you," she said. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." My chest tightened. "What is it?" She stared down at her tea. "When your father and I married, I thought I could handle him. I thought his temper was something manageable, that it came from stress or pressure or his military training." She shook her head. "I was wrong." I realized too late that the anger was not circumstantial. It was who he was. I swallowed. "Linda, you do not have to." She raised a hand gently. "Let me finish." She inhaled deeply. "When you were a teenager, I saw the way he spoke to you, the way he controlled you, the way he made you afraid to breathe wrong. But I never stepped in. I never protected you. I was too scared. I let you take the blows meant for me." Her voice cracked on the last sentence. I felt a slow ache spread through my chest. "You did what you needed to survive," I said softly. "You were living in the same fear I was." She looked up, her eyes glistening. "That does not excuse it." "No," I said gently. "But it explains it." She nodded, her breath unsteady. "You were the first one who showed me courage. Even after everything he did, you stood up at that dinner table. You tried to speak. You fought for your voice. You showed me what it looked like to reach for freedom." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "If you had not done that, I would still be in that house, shrinking myself to fit inside his rage." Silence settled between us, warm and full, the kind of silence that held meaning rather than fear. We talked for an hour longer, about her new townhouse, about her reading group at the library, about the potted plant she was afraid of killing but cared for like a child, about life outside the shadow of a man who had convinced both of us that safety was a privilege instead of a right. After she left, I stood by the window and watched her walk down the driveway. She moved with a steadiness she had not possessed before, a steadiness I recognized, the steadiness of someone finally living her own life. I sat back on the couch and pulled out the envelope, the original envelope, the one I had held the night of the assault. The paper inside had been replaced with the official claim documents and financial statements, but I kept the envelope itself. It was creased and worn now, but it symbolized something greater than money. It symbolized the moment I tried to step into my life, the moment he tried to stop me, the moment everything changed. I ran my thumb along the edge. Winning the lottery had not saved me. Speaking had. Standing up had. Saying no had. Bringing light into a room that had been ruled by shadows had. The money simply gave me the space to rebuild the life he tried to destroy. I placed the envelope gently on the table and leaned back. My phone buzzed with a message. A reminder from the Domestic Violence Center about the next volunteer meeting. I was scheduled to help with intake next Tuesday, to sit with survivors as they filled out paperwork for shelters or emergency funds or court protection, to look them in the eyes and say the words I once needed someone to say to me. "You are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not to blame. You are not weak. You are not the problem. He is." That became my guiding truth. The truth I carried into every conversation. The truth I wove into every form I helped fill out. The truth I offered freely because no one had offered it to me until the night my life cracked open. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. My stomach knotted the moment I saw the return address printed neatly on the corner. Colorado Department of Probation Services. I opened it with careful fingers. Inside was a printed update confirming that my father had completed his intake appointment for anger management and begun community service. It noted his compliance with the firearm surrender. It noted his mandatory check-ins. It noted the continued validity of the no contact order. No contact. 3 years. 3 years of silence from a man who had once made silence my only option. I folded the paper neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Then I walked outside to the porch, breathing in the cool air as I stepped into the sunlight. I stared at the mountains stretching endlessly into the sky. For the first time, I realized something profound. I had not lost a father. I had escaped a dictator, a tyrant, a man who had mistaken fear for respect and control for love, a man who believed raising children meant breaking them into small, obedient pieces, a man who believed silence was safety. I whispered softly into the morning air. I did not lose my father that night. I lost the man who made me believe I was not allowed to speak. The wind carried the words gently down the hillside as if returning them to the world I had once felt shut out from. I sat on the steps and let the warmth wash over me. I thought back to the girl I used to be, the girl who tiptoed through her own home, the girl who flinched at footsteps, the girl who feared a raised voice the way others fear thunder, the girl who believed she was small because someone powerful told her she was. I wished I could sit beside her now, wrap an arm around her shoulders and whisper, "You make it out. You become someone he cannot hurt. You build a life he cannot enter. You learn to speak. You learn to breathe. You learn to live. You become the woman he always feared you would become. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, feeling sunlight settle over me like a promise. I had survived him. I had outgrown him. I had rebuilt myself from the fractures he left behind. And now, standing in the life I had chosen, the life he could never take from me, I felt the final piece of truth click into place. I was free, fully, irrevocably, quietly, powerfully, free. In the quiet, after a story like this, I want to speak directly to you, the person who stayed with me until the very end. If you are still here, it means something inside this story touched a part of your own life. Maybe you have lived through fear that no one saw. Maybe you have carried silence for years because speaking felt dangerous. Maybe you know what it is like to love someone who used their power to take pieces of you. Or maybe you simply recognize injustice when you see it and your heart refuses to look away. Whatever brought you here, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not alone. There are so many people who walk through the world carrying bruises no one else can see, wounds that never showed up on scans or reports. People who survived by staying quiet, by shrinking, by convincing themselves that if they could just be better, kinder, quieter, easier, then maybe the violence would stop. But the truth is this: abuse is not caused by your flaws. It is caused by someone else's choices. And harm done to you is never your fault. If you saw yourself anywhere in my story, even in the smallest way, please know that speaking up does not make you disloyal. Telling the truth does not make you dramatic. Protecting yourself does not make you selfish. Walking away does not make you ungrateful. Choosing your own safety does not make you weak. If anything, it makes you stronger than you realize. And maybe you are not ready to speak yet. Maybe you are not ready to leave. Maybe you are still sorting through the layers of fear and love and obligation that keep you tied to someone who hurts you. That is okay. Healing does not run on anyone's schedule but your own. But when the time comes when you finally take that first step towards your freedom, know that there are people who will believe you, people who will stand beside you, people who will help you rebuild the pieces someone tried to break. And if this story reminded you of someone you love, someone you worry about, someone who seems smaller than they used to be, reach out to them. Ask if they are safe. Ask if they are okay. Ask if they need you. Sometimes one question can open a door they have been too afraid to touch. Before you go, I want you to do one thing for me. Share in the comments what part of this story stayed with you the most. Not details you are not ready to speak, not anything you feel pressured to reveal, just the moment that made you feel something. Your voice could remind someone else that their feelings are real. And if you want more stories about justice, healing, courage, and the strength it takes to walk away, please consider subscribing. This community is here for you. You matter. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And wherever you are right now, whatever you have survived, I am proud of you for being here. Always.